So there we are. We are back, and from what I see on my notes here, Nick, you've got a section on sports today. Nick. So yes, you have a thing on sports today. What is it?
Yeah,
What you got?
absolutely. So, I think in amidst this lockdown, there's one thing that we can have a really interesting talk about, and that is the state and nature of all different varieties of sports. And I wanted to pick your brain on your opinions on it, because for me, I'm a bit biased. I'm a big sports fan. I like sports in pretty much all the varieties.
You are a big sports boy, yeah.
I'm a big sports boy. So, first thing I want to bring up with you.
Right.
What do you know of what's going on at the Premier League at the minute? I'll take that silence as a nothing.
Yeah, I know. Not a darn thing,
Okay.
I did.
So, I'll inform you of what's happening, and we'll get your reaction.
Okay.
So, effectively, the Premier League went and cancelled all of its games because of not cancelled them, but postponed them
Right,
because of this virus.
right.
They since authorized the return to training originally in small groups of non-contact,
Right.
and
yeah.
just the other day they have allowed Premier League teams and I think other like championship level clubs to return to training in larger groups with tackling involved, but with limited contact outside of that. With the aim being to restart Premier League games behind closed doors on the 17th of June.
Behind closed doors makes it sound so sketchy.
Well, basically, the idea is they are going to broadcast every single game from now to the end of the season.
Oh, okay.
So
okay. Right.
fans will be able to see what's happening, but they won't be allowed inside stadiums to watch.
Right, okay.
So the idea being there, they are preventing the large gatherings of fans inside the stadiums, but players have voiced concerns. Newcastle left-back Danny Rose said there should be absolutely no discussion of football restarting at all until numbers in terms of infected and deaths drop significantly.
I mean, he's got a
And
damn good point, if I'm honest.
Watford captain Troy Deeney refused to return to training, stating that his child had breathing difficulties on birth. He was still a very young child, I think maybe 1 or 2, and that he wasn't going to risk getting the virus himself by turning up to training when it could potentially harm his child.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I mean...
Yeah, absolutely. So, what do you think about the Premier League and potentially other top-flight football leagues? We know the Bundesliga that's the German top flight.
Yeah, I guessed
earliest.
Not to sound too dreadful, but I had kind of guessed by the pronunciation.
What do you think about them returning so soon?
Well, I mean, obviously, I don't know enough about sports to kind of like have a massive. I'm not going to claim to be the smartest person on this topic, but I think it's the same problem as when they're trying to push for people who are in hairdressing, people who are in like food services, people who are in like they want services for the people who they deem are okay enough to stay home and be in the lockdown for as long as it takes and whatever. They need entertainment, they need their like services, they need blah blah blah. They want all their leisure activities to stay the same, but they don't want anything to like be done about saving people's lives, basically. In
It
one
seems at the
regard.
minute the main argument seems to be welfare versus economy. There seems to be
Yeah.
you're either on the side of people's lives need to be put first, or you're on the side of the economy is paramount and more people are going to suffer if everything goes to hell. And that seems to be what's happening in America more than anything else.
Oh yeah, that's
Where-
been a massive issue for them.
I mean, I'm not the biggest supporter of the Conservative government or the Conservatives in general, but credit where credit's due, the furlough system they put in place has helped a lot of people, and I think that was a very good decision on their behalf, and one
Yes.
which I can't see the likes of the Republicans bringing in.
However,
And hell, the Republicans have already left it too late, and now they've got riots on the streets.
well,
not for
I don't think that's
just
the
for that,
only
but-
reason.
Not just for that, but before, and we're probably going to get into that discussion later in the show, but even before the recent race issues in America, we have seen lots of protest and disquiet on the street, because all they did was give everyone $1,200 to try and make it through this pandemic if it couldn't work, and obviously that wasn't enough. And I think
Yeah, I mean,
comparatively,
they didn't think through the amount of time or the amount of money that would be needed. I mean, $1,200, that is... I mean, if you just take the number and move it straight across to pounds, you realise that is somebody's minimum wage, like, pay for a month. That's about
Yeah.
what it is.
absolutely.
Like, that's an apprentice wage kind of thing. It's nonsense.
Yeah. Now, here's the thing. I do think if we bring it back to sport, I do think there are ways and means that sport can be done without endangering the sports people. And I think if that is true, then if that is the case, then it should be done.
That's right,
I
FIFA
think-
tournaments.
Yeah, that was actually. Did you see that on social media?
Yes, I have seen weird things. But I think
So-
my favourite thing, I will say this is my favourite thing, I've been wondering when I can kind of bring it up in this topic, is I think it's a South Korean team got in massive trouble because they put sex dolls in the audience because
Yes,
they didn't have an
that was-
actual audience, but it made the players feel like things were back to normal. And I think
Yeah.
on
so,
the one hand,
what-
because I saw photos, all of the dolls were dressed, right? So it's nothing like crass. So in that regard, I think
Yeah,
that's fine. I think that's the funniest use, and that just seems genius.
I will also point out, setting a great example, all the sex dolls were wearing PPE.
Exactly.
And I mean,
like they were
I
doing
think-
better than some of the people.
For those people who are refusing to wear PPE, there are sex dolls making better life choices than you. So,
It's never. I don't think anybody expected that to be a sentence aimed at them at any point. in
well,
their lives.
exactly. If I bring it back to sports, because
Yes.
as I said,
Sorry,
we
don't want to
have got
distract.
we do have a situation where I think certain sports can be undertaken without putting competitors at risk. I think football, for the most part, is actually one of them. I think so long as nobody is playing with the virus, then I think for the most part of all the sports you could be taking part in, football's a pretty safe one. All things
I
considered.
just started laughing at the idea of somebody saying, "Yeah, you've got to stay 6 feet apart," and you going, "But I've
Suddenly
got to stop
defenders are
it."
finding their job much harder.
Yeah, you've got the ball, and so you're like, "Well, I'm home safe." Like nothing can
Everyone's
harm
running
me.
away from you.
I just thought that was such an ingenious, like, hilarious thing to my brain. Was just the idea that you are now untouchable. Like.
It's football, but you can't touch the person with the ball.
Exactly. I mean, but I still think like a bit of we are at a point now where esports are enough of a thing that temporarily we could
Yes.
replace regular sport with esports, but just
I will
use the
say,
players of the regular sport.
The Premier League, to try and keep people engaged and try and keep people interested, actually have had what they have called e-Premier League invitationals,
I love that.
where all the Premier League clubs were invited to participate, and they could either choose one of their players or a fan of their choice to play FIFA on their behalf against other Premier League teams using their own team in the game and having a great big knockout tournament to win the
that-
invitational.
That is amazing,
Um,
but I think there needs to be, and I think if there isn't one already, but I have a feeling there is, a version of FIFA. I think it exists of you can just control one player if you have enough
Yes, there is.
people. Yeah. So why not just have the team, like all of them? You set them all up. Everybody agrees it's either PlayStation or Xbox, whatever. You know, whoever donates enough, they get like the whole deal. I don't know. It's how money works in a capitalist society, but You then
I think that would.
they all have to take their role and play it the best they can on FIFA, because then as well you get to go, oh hey, they're actually also good at this other thing.
Yeah, I think that would actually be a really interesting experiment to see, especially if you get players playing their own position with their own player in the game.
Yeah, because
and
then
watching them get frustrated at themselves. Because God knows I've played FIFA and I've like cursed obscenely at players for not being as good as they should be.
I mean,
and I want to see players going like, I should be faster.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I mean, like there was those there have been racist incidents that my brother has shared to me, with the fact that certain black players have like found themselves with either a skinhead or an afro, and they're like,
oh yeah,
no, that's wrong. That's
Yeah.
not even how I look. And I think like it's moments like that we would be able to kind of like fine tune FIFA in such a way, because if you're going, oh right, okay, the players themselves could be actually having to go through this again, we don't know, you'd make sure it was actually like good and not accidentally racially insensitive. Like
I'll say for years, Newcastle captain Jamal Lascelles never had an accurate sprite. I don't know if he even has on this FIFA. I haven't seen him close up enough yet on it. But for years, it just looked like some other dark-skinned man had taken his place. Like,
you're suddenly going, is this GTA San Andreas? Like,
yeah. But I will point out, so if I move the topic away from football, because yeah, football's a big talking factor at the minute, I will say there are weird, the way different sports have reacted to this has been really fascinating to watch. So, for example, I'm a swimmer, and Swim England have outright, and it was only announced the other day, have outright cancelled every single event or competition until the end of the year.
wow.
There is no, we will see how it's doing by January. Well, January would be the end of the year. There's been no like, oh, we'll see how it's doing in October. You know what I mean? It has been, we are outright cancelling it. See you next year. Let's see what we can do. They haven't said that you won't be able to return to pools to train in that time. That is a potential, and that is obviously something lots of swimmers are crossing their fingers and hoping they will get in for.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of competitions, there will be nothing until January at the earliest. And I think that's really fascinating, because of all the sports in which you're fairly safe, swimming is a fairly safe sport once you actually get into it. It's all the facilities that you need to use around
Yeah,
the
I mean,
sport,
the
which
thing is
puts people at risk.
you could do it even with the pool of either have a lane in between and then just do everybody's times, so that the events are less about like the speed against each other and the times, because obviously the shorter the time the better you do. Like that's also how you could measure it. And so yes, it would be longer for the people who were judging it to kind of like sit down, but
Absolutely.
it's not that hard. Like there's a way around it. I just thought, isn't cricket already social distancing?
Oh, hell yeah, there's no reason for cricket to be stopping. They are like, they are never within touching distance of each other.
I was gonna say, like if they are, it's like for less than 2 seconds. Like in an entire, like, what, 3 hours you can sit out in the sun and get hammered?
Yeah.
You know?
I'll say, like, as well, again, I think the onus has to be on athletes being tested by the respective leagues. And I can understand leagues and bodies and whatever not wanting to pay exorbitant amounts to test players and would rather just keep them out altogether because it could bankrupt the league. Like the Premier League, I think, is paying something like £30 million a month to, and I might be wrong on that, I would have to fact check, but they are paying an extortionate amount of money every month to test all the players, club staff, and officials who would be involved with making the game run, to ensure that they are getting regularly tested to make sure that none of them are playing. And I think something like 9 players and staff have shown up since the return to training because of these tests, have shown up as coronavirus positive and have been sent off to isolate. And clearly that's the best way to go about doing it. And I mean, I know until we have a cure, there's always going to be positive tests and you can't guarantee that anybody doesn't have it. But regular testing in both sport and society is surely the way to go forward. And the fact that it's still such a hard thing to do is beyond, well, at least in this country, is baffling to me.
Yeah. I mean, it's there's so much of this where it's like you can see the solution in one regard, and then at the same time, it's just not being done. But I'm thinking as well. Do you think people are going to be getting into like watching golf more now and F1? Because I mean, those are
I
pretty
don't
much.
think there is a virus on Earth that could get me to watch golf or F1.
I just thought because like, those are the ones that you definitely can't stop. Like they are not. If you are not social distancing in F1, you have greater problems in one regard than COVID, because you have a steering wheel through your torso. Like you're in a problem.
I think the whole social distancing measures in F1 would make the race a whole lot more interesting because as far as I can tell, the only reason to social distance during F1 would be for the pit teams for repairing the cars. But to me, that just says that you should have an F1 race and it's just last man standing. Whoever's car doesn't blow up
That is good.
wins.
Have you seen there was just when this all broke out really the barbers who basically were using their tools taped to like broom handles and stuff. Yeah. Well, now I'm thinking, what about an F1 race where the pit crew have to do that?
And the pit crew have to use all their tools attached to 6-foot-long poles.
Exactly, because I mean, you're gonna drop one of those screws. How do you do that?
You just have to have a really long
like,
pair of pliers.
Yeah, like you're sat there like you could be doing so well, and you've bought like such a massive margin, and then your pit crew guy loses like the nut that he's got to try and like put on, and you're watching him fumble for like 3 straight minutes, and it would just be because it would then just like it would. There would be such a difference to the skill level. I think you'd be able to watch like documentaries of them getting used to like doing all these with like a 6-foot pole. I just think that'd be great.
I want to really pick your brain on the real controversy. Well, what should be a controversy and isn't getting talked about enough in terms of sport and coronavirus.
Okay.
And that is the wonderful world of professional wrestling.
Oh, right. Well, I mean, you can't social distance in wrestling. I've got to be honest, it's kind of the point. Like,
Not only can you not socially distance in it, it depends. So all independent levels, so those at the lower level shows, have been cancelled. There's
Right.
no one running them. There's no one crazy enough to try and run them because at that level, your main income is the fans in attendance, and no one can get away with getting fans in attendance in this current lockdown.
yeah.
All lower level shows are cancelled. Great, that's fine. However, there are 2 promotions still running shows.
Okay.
That is All Elite Wrestling and WWE.
Right.
So, the way they are getting about this is both shows are owned by billionaires.
Obviously.
WWE, owned
As
by
is
the infamous
everything.
Vince McMahon, and AEW is being owned by the Khan family, mainly Tony Khan. And
Is he related
what
to
they are
Scott
doing,
Khan from Hawaii Five-0 in any way, shape, or form?
So what they are doing is they have empty arenas, whether it be so WWE uses their performance center out of Orlando,
Right.
and AEW have bounced around the country a little bit using different venues where they've had access to.
Right.
So sometimes they will film a great big clump of shows at one person's training center, and then they will move. And their most recent pay-per-view happened at the Jaguars football stadium in whatever state the Jaguars are from. I don't care. I think it's Jacksonville.
Yeah. I was gonna say that Jacksonville's like
So-
Tennessee.
Yes, something like that. So they use that arena. The difference is AEW are working on using basically a limited performer list. So they are testing, I think, as far as I'm aware, they are testing performers They are keeping as few people involved as possible. They are using as small a roster as possible. So most people, if they aren't available to be used, are just being told stay at home, getting paid, and just staying away. And so they're usually using the same people just about on every show in a different way, and effectively trying to keep that spread. So even if one of them did catch it and spread it, they would spread it to a smaller part of the roster as possible.
Yeah.
Then we have the contrasting the contrasting solution of the WWE. So they made headlines for the way they ran WrestleMania, which was they too have been doing it in an empty arena with no crowd, and it has been haunting to watch wrestlers cut promos to nobody as if they were actually talking to a crowd full of people.
I want to see this now. I will have to, once this show is over, watch this because it sounds
I will send you clips.
Terrible.
Now, here's the thing. The controversy comes from Vince McMahon's attitude to the issue of coronavirus. He has, for a long time, been accused of being out of touch with the wider world, and he doesn't really pay attention to it because it's not part of his plans.
Right.
And right now, he has not got any coronavirus testing happening for his athletes. He is having them showing up. I think they might be doing a temperature test, but otherwise, he is.
It's not even like a thermometer. It's just him like putting the back of his hand on their forehead and going, I think it's all right. It's like...
Pretty much. And so, what he has been accused of doing as well is he has been accused of forcing people to show up to work amidst the lockdown. The company as a whole was accused of bribing Florida officials to give them status as effectively key workers to allow them to continue filming. And he effectively has been accused by staff on public record as making them show up to work in amidst the lockdown. So there's been staff saying, we don't want to work right now, we are scared of getting the virus, and we are scared that if we say no, that we will lose our jobs.
Wow, what a fun time for them.
There was even their top superstar, Roman Reigns, their absolute top boy, top dog. You don't get the joke there, but he keeps calling himself a dog. Anyway.
Okay, right. Okay, so now you've filled in the audience as well, because I don't think there's masses of my audience.
I'll keep the context there. So, he had recently come off a battle with leukemia. He had been in remission with it because he had caught it in, I want to say college, I might be wrong there. But he had had it in the past.
more developed rather than caught.
He had gone in remission.
Yeah.
And he recently had a second bout of it and went off to get treatment and came back and was lauded as a hero and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And when the coronavirus issue in America started getting serious, he basically told the company, I will not be showing up again until this virus is sorted.
Well, no, he's too high risk. Like
the man's got leukemia.
Yeah.
Instead of telling people, because he was meant to be in the main event of WrestleMania. He was meant to be in the big match, the big storyline. And instead of telling people, hey, he's got leukemia, we can't risk it, and treating him as the hero that he should be described as, the company has refused outright to talk about him.
Wow.
People aren't allowed to mention his name on a TV show again. He isn't being talked about. They didn't talk about him being replaced in his match. They just silently changed the competitor to a different wrestler. And he is just, it's like he never existed. They just don't talk about him.
That is unbelievable. That's absolutely awful.
Yeah, it is absolutely wild, the WWE's reaction to this virus. And I'm amazed because a lot of the controversy in terms of sports and entertainment at the minute has been about whether the Premier League is doing the right thing or football leagues are doing the right thing by returning. And here you have professional wrestlers who are literally being forced to work and being threatened with their jobs if they don't, and aren't getting adequate testing.
Well, I mean, as well, right? And I know this is the same as the FIFA thing, but WWE paid for a video game every year. They have a video game come out every year. Just do it that way.
I would pay to watch an episode of Raw which was all played by the wrestlers playing their characters in the games and just watching the reactions when reality starts to break apart,
Well,
when the
yeah.
glitches
I
kick
mean,
in.
I've played them, and they are so very broken games. And I mean, at the very least, then they would kind of like go, okay, maybe we start having a conversation with 2K, like I said about EA. But
God
it's
knows, yeah.
it's just unbelievable. If you have the money to pay for that, just use that instead. You
Yeah.
could do it all that way.
There was a lot of kickoff about the UFC as well. The UFC recently held their UFC 249, I want to say it was.
Okay.
And they caught a lot of heat for trying to push forward the event. They had made an agreement with the Native American tribe or something like that, where basically they owned land outside of California, I want to say,
All right.
which wasn't governed by state law like other places because it was a Native American reservation.
Yeah.
And they had come to an agreement with this Native American group to film UFC on their settlement, probably for a large amount of money. So that,
Yeah, as you would.
because at the time, California had a total lockdown rule in. It was one of the first states to do it. So rather than obey the lockdown, UFC made this agreement to continue on with the fights, and were only stopped when the head of Disney, who is obviously Disney owns ESPN, which
Yeah.
broadcasts UFC, stepped
Mickey
in
Mouse
and
himself
said,
stepped in.
"No way." It has since happened. I believe, I can't remember where they used, but like the wrestling, they used an empty arena. Commentators were socially distant. Fighters were all given thorough testing before they got in the ring. They were only allowed one cornerman in the ring with them. So the fighters and their cornermen were tested and were, for the most part, socially distanced. No fans, socially distanced commentators, and fighters were, because of the obvious, kept apart backstage. And that seems to be the right way to do, close contact sports is,
Yeah.
crucially, in-depth testing and social distancing when they're not competing. And I think that can be applied across a wide spectrum of sports.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it seems a bit like a no-brainer in one sense, and you kind of think, hang on, if we as two people who can like literally just sit and make this as a live stream midday on a Saturday can kind of like come up with where some of these things can be fixed, how are the people who are paid billions like not getting this? Like it's
Well, I think that's a crucial part there is billions, and money talks. I think money does talk a lot, and when it comes down to it, testing isn't cheap. And I think there's a lot of sports which would rather just either cancel it outright, or if they're not going to cancel it, I think they would rather just not pay for the testing.
that's and that's just really abhorrent, if I'm honest. Like why wouldn't you want to actually make sure that your like staff are safe? I mean, that's the important thing. But then not to get too uppity about the government in this segment, but because we're talking about sport, but the fact that the Tories were saying, "Oh, we're not going back to war, going back to work, but we're going to send in school children," like that doesn't make a lot of sense. And so it just seems to be that's. I really hope that this means we kind of like reconsider how we run things, I guess.
I do think in the not too distant future on the show, we can talk about what the new normal will be in terms of society at large rather than just in sports, because I think that's a really important point, is that I think across the board, this virus is going to change the systems and way we think about work for the long term, whether that's for better or worse.
Yeah. I mean, I totally get that, but I think now it is time for another piece of music, and the track that is coming up, it is very linked, it is very topical because of my lovely birthday that happened during this lockdown, and that track is "The Bad Side of 25" by Patrick Stump.